This one I have a little bit more comfortable. All right, we're live. Brian Silver. Hi. All right, Brian. Why don't you start with the facts? Start with your name. Start with where we are and how we got here today. Start with the facts. Where are you? What's the date? Give me your year you're born. Give me the Brian Silver facts. Go.
My name is Brian Silver. I'm in Sylvania, Ohio.
What's the
I was
date?
born August 9th, 1955. Today is June 17th, 2023.
And how come you are here in this house?
Because I am on my way to a new chapter in my life. My wife and I are moving to Arizona.
Okay, how'd you pick Arizona?
It's something that we visited back in November, December of 2022, and we found to be very desirable.
Okay.
And we want to get out of the cold and the snow and the ice and the rain. We just want a better temperature.
I like it. Okay. So let's go back. So you were born in 1955.
Yes.
So what I want to do is I want you to paint for me a picture of your family tree, not your kids or your wife, but of your parents and as many people connected to each parent and their parents, names that you can come up with on both sides, starting with both of your parents, their parents, and aunts, uncles, and everyone else.
My mother and father were Wesley and Betty Silver. My father's parents I did not really know very well. My father's dad died when he was 13 years old. His name was Benjamin. His mother died when I was about 2 years old. Her name was Minnie. He had about, I believe, 4 or 5 brothers and sisters. He had one sibling, his brother, who moved to California many years ago, and I've only saw him once or twice. He had 2 sisters that lived in New York, which we would see maybe once every 3 or 4 years, and the rest of his family we really never saw.
Okay, so your dad had your father's parents were Minnie and Benjamin.
Correct.
And Benjamin had siblings. Is that okay? That's who you just explained. Did you explain your parents?
No,
your
my
dad's?
parents.
Okay, that
My
was
parents.
your dad.
That was my dad.
Okay, did
I
you
didn't know anything beyond who his parents were?
Okay.
Did not know any of his aunts or any uncles.
You didn't know his aunts or
Did not know
uncles?
any, but no.
Okay.
When my dad was born, his father was 51 years old. His mother was 41.
And did you know the circumstance and why he was born so late? I mean, back then that was really late.
I would say probably he was an oops baby.
Okay.
And my dad always told me that his father passed away when he was 13 years old.
When your dad was 13.
When he was 13 years old, so I never really knew the numbers. I really didn't know how old my grandfather was, that he was 51 years old until actually starting the move, I found my grandparents, his parents, birth certificates.
Really?
And I was able to learn when they were born and where they were from.
Was your father bar mitzvahed and was his dad at the bar mitzvah? Do you know that?
I don't know that, but my dad, was he bar mitzvahed? Absolutely.
Okay. All right, so that's your dad's side of the family, and now let's go to your mom's side of the family.
Okay. My mother's father was named Benjamin also.
Really?
And her mother was named Ida.
Okay.
And they were both from Belarus. And I knew a little bit of the family that was aunts and uncles of my parents, of my mom and her family.
So your mom's parents were from Belarus, and they immigrated to the States. Your mom was born here, right?
Was born in the States, yes.
Okay. And Benjamin's siblings, did you know any of your Any of that?
No, I never knew any of those siblings. I knew some cousins of my grandmother.
Okay.
Little bit. I didn't know them well, my grandmother passed away when I was about 3 years old, and my grandfather passed away when I was about 15 years old.
And did your mother have siblings?
My mother had 5 brothers and sisters.
And did you know all of them?
Absolutely, yes.
And so who were they?
The oldest was a sister. Her name was Lee Gelman. The next in line was her sister Rose, and then her sister Faye. And she had 2 brothers, Irv and Jake.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
Applebaum.
Okay. And are any of her siblings alive?
No,
They're all passed.
everybody is passed.
And their kids, do you know their kids?
Yeah, I knew all the kids. My Aunt Lee, which was the oldest sister my mother had, she has 3 children who I know pretty well.
Okay.
The next was Aunt Rose, and she had two children, and one of them passed away about 3 years ago. That was my cousin Paul and his sister Maureen, which is still thriving.
Okay. So you were raised in
Akron, Ohio.
And were your parents born in Akron?
My mother was born in Akron.
Okay.
My father was actually born in Youngstown.
Okay. And do you know what brought him to Akron?
I would say that from what I understand is that his father owned a grocery store. And I think for whatever reason, he probably left Youngstown. Don't know what the condition of the businesses were at that time, and came to Akron.
Okay.
I really don't know much about my grandparents on my father's side.
So, all right, so give me the names of the schools that you went to until college.
I went to Fairlawn Elementary School.
Okay.
And then I went to Litchfield Junior High School. And then I went to Firestone High School.
Okay.
And then I went to Ohio State.
And who were some of your friends, who were some of the people that you hung around from the earliest age that you can remember?
Really, it was very limited. I had one friend, his name was Mark Cheplowitz.
Okay.
And his mother and my mother were very, very close. Some people thought they were like sisters. So we were together with them a lot.
Okay.
And so we were naturally pushed together. Did we get along well? We did. Depended on the day of the week, the circumstances. And, we're still friendly today.
Okay.
We do keep in touch. We talk maybe once or twice a year.
Okay, so Mark Cheplowitz.
Yes.
And maybe who were some of your friends when you got a little bit older, maybe in grade school or a little bit older than that, maybe even high school?
Really, I had, when I was in elementary school, I had a friend who lived across the street, a couple buddies who lived down the street. Eventually, actually, they all moved away out of Akron. Their parents, a lot of people in Akron in those years worked for the rubber companies, and a lot of people got transferred and out and things like that. In high school, I had really 4 good friends, and unfortunately, all 4 good friends have passed.
And who were they?
That was Jeff Kilgore. Another one, his name was Henry. This is really bad that I can't remember their names. But
You remember they passed.
I remember the past. Let's see, there was...
Maybe they'll come back to you.
It'll come back to me. My memory is not as great as it should be.
And what about siblings, your siblings?
I have one brother.
And how old is he?
My brother is 61 years old.
Okay, and he lives where?
He lives in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay, and so you two grew up together, and what were some of your memories of you and he when you were growing up in your household?
Well, we grew up together. There's 7 years difference between us. So when I left for Ohio State in 1973, He was still a young man, a young child.
Right.
So a lot of his growth, I was not there to be part of.
Okay.
And so, but our memories were that we were, older brother, younger brother. I mean, I remember that I got a BB gun, a pistol, and we were outside, and I decided to see if it hurts. So I shot him in the leg at point blank.
Okay.
And it hurt.
Right. I'm sure it did.
It did.
And so your parents, what did your mother and father, one of them worked.
Mm-hmm.
What did your parents do when you were growing up?
My mother was a stay-at-home mom. My
Okay.
mother never worked.
Okay.
I think that was by design, to be quite honest with you. My father worked too much.
Okay.
My father was, for the most part, self-employed.
Okay.
He was a aluminum siding applicator.
Which is what?
He installed aluminum siding on homes. There was a lot of new construction going on in Akron and the Cleveland area and surrounding areas. And he is what he did.
Okay. So aluminum siding then is the equivalent to someone who would do vinyl siding.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And he got into that business because my mother's sister's husband.
Your mother's sister's husband. Okay.
His name was Mickey Kaufman.
Uh-huh.
Him and his older brother and a third party literally invented aluminum siding.
Wow.
The third party had the patent on how two panels interlocked.
Okay.
And they built a incredibly large international company. They were the world's largest producer of aluminum siding.
Wow.
And about 1973, 74, they sold out to U.S. Steel, and it was the largest purchase that U.S. Steel made of any company
Wow.
in their history.
Okay. So your dad, what about in the wintertime? Could he install siding then?
My dad, he worked as many days as he could.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was dedicated to his family. When he was doing a lot of work in Cleveland, he literally had a box van. It was an old, like Hertz Rent-A-Truck that he bought used, and he would sleep in that box truck 5-6 nights of the week.
While he was on the job.
Because he was on the job. Because he knew that when wintertime came, he wasn't going to be as busy. But
Right.
I will tell you from my own experience, because I would work with him different times, he dressed the part, and he knew that he had to provide for his family.
Okay. And do you think that his work ethic rubbed off on you and your brother?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because he worked for his family. We grew up, my parents were not wealthy by no means, but we both had new bicycles, we had new skis. They always seemed to find a way to pay for things. And later, as you learned that they couldn't afford it, but they figured it out.
Okay. And so, what were some of the things that you liked to do when you were a little kid, and then maybe as you got older?
As a little kid, I probably, we did things a little bit different back then. I mean, we would play Army. We'd go into the woods. We had toy guns. We would dress up the part. That's what we did. We were always outside, and until our parents would call us, and till it was time to go to bed. But we were always outside. We ride our bikes. We did all different kinds of things. But we played.
Were you involved in any sports in school?
Yes, I actually lettered in track for 4 years.
Okay.
And
what on track were you doing?
I was the manager of the team.
Okay.
And it's kind of an interesting story, but we had our track coach, and those years we had physical education classes. He was a friend of the family.
Okay.
And
Jewish guy or no?
No, he's not Jewish. And
Okay.
he actually bought the house that my grandfather built for my parents, the house I was born in.
Okay, say that one more time.
Okay.
The coach.
The coach bought the home that my parents owned when I was born. It was a house that my grandfather built for
Okay.
my mother and father.
Okay.
My grandfather was a builder.
Okay. He built them a house.
Built them a house.
You were born there.
I was born
and
there.
Then they moved.
And then my parents moved.
And he bought that house.
And he bought that house.
So you had some relationship
We
with
had a
him.
little bit of relationship.
Okay. And so.
I was a chubby child.
Okay.
I always fought weight. And he insisted that I go out for the track team as the manager.
Okay.
And he would make me work out with the track team and the cross country team.
Okay.
And
Were sports when you were in high school as competitive as they were when your son was in high school?
I'm going to say yes. Our high school was a little unique in that fact that we never had a winning football team. We never won any games. We weren't really good in baseball, but we excelled in golf and tennis. We used to call the country club sports. My father, he figured out a way for us to move into a very nice neighborhood. And it was probably the biggest gamble he ever made. He bought 2 houses on the same street at auction. I don't know where he got the money to do it, but he figured out a way to do it.
Why did he need 2?
It was a good deal.
Okay.
And it was like I said, it was the biggest gamble he ever made in his life. And he said whatever house doesn't sell, they were going to move into. And it happened to be in a very, very nice neighborhood, very desirable neighborhood. And that's where we grew up.
How old were you when he was doing that? Do you remember?
I was probably, I would say 6, 7 years old.
Okay.
Somewhere in that age.
And what were some of the things that you loved about the house that you grew up in?
It was modern. We each had, my brother and I, we had, for a few years we shared a bedroom, then we had our own bedrooms. We had plenty of bathrooms to go around. I mean, it had a big basement, we had a den, we had a living room. It was just a really nice house, and it was full of love.
What were some of the tougher parts about when you were growing up? What were some of the things that caused you stress or embarrassment or angst?
Well, my mother had 5 brothers and sisters, and each one of those turned out to become very wealthy. My mother and my father were not wealthy. By today's standards, we would say they were poor. But they provided for us. And there was always a little bit of jealousy, as I had cousins that got brand new Oldsmobile 442 convertibles. I had one cousin who got a brand new Triumph that his father imported from England for him. And it was tough because I saw a lot of things that rich people do, surrounded by it, and we weren't part of it.
So I knew your parents, and I never felt like they were the jealous type. Were they? Do you feel like they felt that way, or was that just a kid feeling that way?
I think down deep inside, they were probably felt a little bit inferior, maybe. My grandfather, my mother's father, helped along the way when things were necessary. He left money for my brother and I to go to college. And but as it turns out, when you look back, now that I'm 68 years old, you learn what wealth really is. And I'm sorry, it's very difficult. But wealth is your family,
Sure.
your children. It's their success. It's your grandchildren. And my parents knew that. And that's what kept them going. And to this day, when I talk to my cousins, they all say the same thing. My parents were the only relatives that they had, aunt and uncle, that were real people. And they admired them.
Sure.
Each and every one says that.
What did you like to do with your parents, or what did you like to do with your dad? He was a tinkerer. So did you tinker with him?
I would tinker with him. My father he never would hire a repairman, somebody to come out to service anything, no matter what it was. He knew how to do it. He figured out how to do it.
Right.
I mean, he bought a old Jeep Cherokee. He put a new motor in it in our garage. I mean, he cut into the ceiling, into the rafters, and put a chain around it and a hoist, and he took the motor in and out.
Right.
That's what he would do. We didn't have air conditioning for many years while I was growing up. One day he figured out a way to buy an air conditioner, and he installed it himself. There was really nothing he could not do.
And you love that about him?
Absolutely.
Right. Do you think that would you say that your father was there for you when your stuff, was he working all the time? What do you think?
He was there.
Okay.
When push came to shove, he was there. I knew it was there. But he worked 7 days a week.
Right.
He worked 7 days a week.
That was his thing.
That was what he had to do.
So what did you like doing with your mom?
Well, my mother she was there when we got home from school.
Right.
We'd come home from school, we'd have a snack, we'd go out and play. She was a great kosher cook. She cooked the old-fashioned way. And, many nights it was just my brother and myself and my mom for dinner. And then there was a couple nights my father was there. But I remember, her gift to us was a warm home and good food.
She showed her love to you through food. She
100%.
put her love into it, didn't she?
Absolutely.
If you could have a meal that she that she could cook, what would it be?
We had a typical Shabbos meal, Friday nights, chicken soup with rice, chicken, brisket, kishka, potato kugel. I mean, she cooked
did
the
it.
old-fashioned way. That's how she cooked.
Right.
That's how
So
she
you'd
cooked.
come home from school, she'd have a snack for you and probably
Absolutely.
be cooking dinner or something.
Absolutely, and we always had. She would bake cakes. She would never make pies or cookies, but she would make certain cakes, and we had a cake dish, and there were always plenty of desserts and cakes in this great big cake dish that she kept on the kitchen counter.
Right.
It was always there.
Was your family the kind of house, whether it was or it wasn't, it doesn't matter, but did people feel comfortable coming in and out of your house? Or
Yes.
it was like that?
It was. And, my friends, of course, they were fine. But again, when I relate back to my cousins who are older than I am, because we were the youngest, they loved coming and visiting.
Your cousins did to your house?
Uncle Wes and Aunt Betty, they loved it. I have one cousin who was from Dayton, and her boyfriend was from Akron. And they met at Ohio State. They dated, they got engaged, and she would come and stay at our house many, many times over a number of years, believe it or not. And I was the little boy that would interrupt their alone time.
Right.
Yeah.
What about Judaism? How did Judaism play a role in your house and in your family?
Being Jewish was very important to my parents.
How so? How did you know that was the case?
We belonged to a conservative congregation. It was important that we went to shul on the holidays. It was important that my brother and I both went to Hebrew school. It was important that we were both bar mitzvahed. It was important that we both married Jewish girls. It was, we celebrated the holidays, and it was very important to them. Judaism was very, very, very important to them. My father, there was things about my father that I think my father actually had a photographic memory. When I think back and I think of the things that he was able to do, he was probably the most intelligent man I know. He could read and speak Hebrew. He taught me my bar mitzvah. In those years, we'd go to the synagogue and we'd meet with. We called him a reverend, but he was.
Who did you call a reverend at the synagogue?
He was like one of the spiritual leaders
at the synagogue.
At the synagogue, they called him a reverend. Conservative.
Okay.
Shul. His name was Reverend Zaltzman, and he would teach everybody their bar and bat mitzvahs.
All right, like the cantor today? Was there a cantor too, and the reverend?
We had a cantor and a rabbi and the whole thing.
Okay.
So they would give you a tape. Yes, there was tape recordings.
Right. Okay. Of your
tape.
Right.
And my dad said, "I'll teach it to you." And my dad knew how to read the Hebrew. He knew how to carry the tone by the notes that is written along with it, the Haftorah. And he taught myself and my brother what we needed to know. He taught us our Torah portion, our Haftorahs.
Okay.
And when you think about it, that, he was bar mitzvahed, how many years that was, but he remembered how to do it. He could help us with homework. If it was algebra, geometry, whatever it was, you could sit down with him and he could help you with the homework. He remembered what it was all about.
So would you say that they, other than through their actions, and were there words that they used to guide you that you remember today that potentially that you use? And what you would tell your kids because of what your parents told you?
Well, my dad was a big, he always said, you've got to be your own man. You got to be your own man. And
what did that mean to him?
To him, it was to be independent to an extent, whether it be a businessman, medical professional. He just wanted us to be, as most parents in those years and even today, I want my children to be better than I was.
Okay.
Have a better lifestyle, have more money, be more sophisticated, drive better cars, whatever it might be. I mean, right. It's always, we want more for your children.
Okay.
And
you feel you feel the same way for your kids?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
And what about your mom? What were some of the words that your mother conveyed to you?
Well, I don't remember exactly the words, but my parents did speak Yiddish fluently. And there was always some Yiddish slang coming out that
right.
They would say to us. They would talk Yiddish amongst themselves when they didn't want us to know what they were talking about.
Who was the disciplinarian in your house?
The disciplinarian, it's a great question. My mother was the first level. And my mother was not afraid to scream and yell.
So she was stage one.
She was stage one.
Wait till your father if it had to go to stage two.
If it had to go to stage two, which
that was the nuclear option.
That generally only happened maybe twice, maybe 3 times a year, very rare 3 times a year.
Okay.
That my father would call it an attitude adjustment. And my father was about 6'2". He was physically built. He was very strong, and he would grab me by my neck, and he pushed me up the side of the wall, and fear was there. Would he punch us? Kind of. But he believed it, and that was the only punishment he gave us. This attitude adjustment, and we feared our father. We literally feared our father. But you know, he was. This is how he disciplined us. So it was Christmas time, and myself and 3 or 4 of my buddies, there was no snow on the ground as I remember it, and it was the middle of the day, and we'd go to the neighbors' houses, and we would steal light bulbs out of their decorations, Christmas lights, and then we'd take them out, and we'd go, you know, they'd be up around the house, and we'd go into the street, and we'd throw them and pop them, and we did that for 2 or 3 days, and then one day there was 3 of us, and if you could picture a house, and there was one on each side of the house, in the front, one on the right, one on the left, and one in the center. So in this particular case, I was in the center. And the door opens, and this man comes out, and he starts screaming and yelling and chasing. Well, I wasn't the fastest kid,
even though you were on the track team,
right? But I was in the middle. So he came after me, and he did get me. He tackled me, and he walked me home probably about 3 blocks, holding me by the collar of my shirt.
Just like on the movies.
Absolutely. He took me to my house, and he knocked on the door, and my dad came to the door, and he explained the vandalism that I caused, and he left, and my dad said to me, "Why did you do that?" I says, "I have no other reason to tell you, but we were having fun. It wasn't right, but I did it." And my dad said, "Okay, you know better than that, and you know you should never do that." And I said, "Yes, I understand." And that was the end of it. There was no other discipline other than that. But I knew that if I did it again and I got caught again, it would not have been a pretty scene, because he was not afraid to discipline at all. And his discipline was very physical.
So what was high school like for you, other than being a 4-year letter person on the track team?
Well, I wasn't the most popular kid.
What makes you say that?
I didn't have a lot of friends.
Okay.
I did acquire some friends from the fact that when I was about 10 years old, there was a family who lived down the street from us that they were skiers. And this is back in those years, there weren't a lot of people that were skiing. And they invited me to go skiing with them once to Boston Mills. And I went skiing, and it was fun. I mean, didn't take lessons. My friend kind of showed me how to do a little bit of that, and went a few times, then started going about every weekend with them, and I learned to ski. And through that, at doing it at a young age, then there was other friends that I had in high school that started skiing, and we just kind of had some buddies. I had some buddies that all skied, and that was our common bond. And then I had one friend whose parents had a summer home on a lake near Silver Lake, and we would go there on the weekends. There was a few of us, and we'd go there, and every weekend we'd go there. They had a speedboat and water skis, and I learned how to water ski, and that was what we did. High school ended, and everybody went their separate way in college, and we lost touch with these guys.
Well, let's stay in high school a little bit.
Okay.
So was high school easy for you, hard for you? Did you like the school part of it, even though maybe the other parts were tough?
As a student, I was not the best student.
Because you
I probably didn't. I didn't apply myself. I just did not apply myself. And at the end of the day, could I have done better? Absolutely. Okay. I could have done better in school.
So before you went to college, and this is a tough one, What do you think was the greatest thing that you either did or happened to you before you went to college? Was it an award you won? Was it?
I didn't win any awards.
Okay.
I didn't win any awards.
Was it a show that you saw? Was there
No.
anything that?
The only thing that happened to me was that, you know, I knew what my dad did for a living. I knew how hard he worked. My uncle, who owned this aluminum siding company, when I was 15, is when I first started. He offered me a summer job, and that summer job was being in a factory. And you know, one year I was in they call their advertising fulfillment department, and I would fulfill orders with pamphlets. They used to have, when they'd have a sales meeting, they give everybody a briefcase, and I was the guy that would emboss the gold letters, the initials on these briefcases. And it was really hot in the factory. And in those years, this machine was hot and it was miserable.
This was the best thing that happened to you?
Let me continue. And then the following couple years, I worked on the loading dock, and I was a checker. I used to check as they loaded the semi-trucks with materials and stuff like that. It was my responsibility to make sure the right boxes were on the truck and stuff like that. But what I learned from that was I learned how hard people have to work. I learned what certain working environments were. They weren't as pretty as you may think. I learned what a union was because, you know, I was on the loading dock, and one day I said, you know, there's some need to sweep something, pile of whatever it is, and grabbed the broom, and next thing I know, I was being written up. Because
you weren't in the union.
I was not in the union. I was an hourly employee, but not union.
So what you're saying, the greatest thing is that the lessons that you learned from it.
The lessons I learned from that was that I needed to work hard to be my own man, as my dad taught me, and this kind of emphasized it even more. But I just knew that I wanted more than working in a factory.
Right.
Working for an hourly wage. And that was...
so that was the eye-opening experience.
That was really eye-opening for me. It really was.
So what do you think before college was the worst thing or the most tragic thing that happened to you before you went to college? Was there one?
There really was no tragedy. I really
lucky.
can tell you there was really no tragedy before I went to college. You know, I guess as I matured and got older, I felt sorry for my mother. I felt sorry for my father, how hard my father continued to work, how he wasn't home that much. You know, was their marriage strained? Yeah, it probably was. Okay, but you know, my parents had a great marriage. At the end of the day, they loved each other.
Right.
They were in love.
Okay, so now you get through college, you get through high school.
Yep.
And you go to college.
Yep.
And what were all the choices? What were all of your choices that you were thinking about going to?
You mean schools?
Yeah, colleges.
Well, I really had only one choice in those years, and that was I was going to go to Ohio State.
Okay.
There
What year?
There was a few reasons.
What year was this?
1973.
Okay. One quick question before we get to that. When was the draft for the Vietnam War, and were you anywhere near that?
On my 19th birthday,
Yes.
the draft had ended. It
Okay.
had just ended.
So was that 1974?
I think it was around 1974.
So was there any chance that you felt like you were going to be drafted?
No. However, so here's how real it was.
Okay.
So they used to they would draw your birth date, and that determined where you were in the draft.
Okay.
So in that year, the year after the draft was ended, okay. On my 19th birthday, maybe it was my 18th birthday, my birth date came up number 2. They still they still had some sort of a draft. And I
Well, was
remember
it for kids that were in college? Could they be drafted?
everybody could be drafted.
Okay.
Everybody could be drafted unless you had some sort of medical disability.
Did you know anyone that was drafted? Not
Actually,
really?
I don't. I really
Okay.
didn't.
So it wasn't a real thing.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I grew up in Akron, Ohio. Kent State was not far from where we lived.
Right.
And when that tragic riot happened,
Do you remember it?
demonstration. Oh, absolutely.
You remember it as a kid in high school? You were in high
Absolutely.
school. What year was that? Do you have any?
That was probably
Well, tell me
probably
what you remember.
1970.
Tell
What
me
I
what you
remember
remember.
is that there was this huge disturbance, and it happened literally, we thought it was like around the corner.
So how far is Kent? So people know how
Kent
far
State
is,
was probably, in those years, 35, 40 minutes away from where we lived.
right.
But I mean, it was something that really, it hit home with everybody.
Okay.
It really, really did.
Okay.
It
right.
really was very tragic.
So now you go and it's college time.
Yep.
And you choose Ohio State.
Correct.
And what were you going to study? Were your parents proud that you were going to school? Your parents did not go to college.
My parents did not go to college.
Were they proud that you went to
My
college?
parents were very proud that I went to college. I had a friend who was actually not a cousin, but we shared an aunt and an uncle. And he was a year older than I was, and he was at Ohio State. And he called me, and when I was a senior in high school, and said, "I'm in the ZBT house, which is a Jewish fraternity, and would you like to come down for a rush party?" So I said, "Yeah, I think so. Let me ask my mom." And when I asked my mom and my dad, can I go to this rush party? Well, knowing who invited me, there was no question I was going.
They respected him.
They respected who he was.
All right. So
I went.
before we get to that, what is a rush party? And you're in high school, right?
I'm in high school.
Okay,
Let me just preface a couple things so you'll understand this.
Yeah.
So in those years, if you applied to a state university, they had to accept you,
Okay.
no matter what your grades were. If you were a 1.1,
Right.
the university had to accept you.
You were going to Ohio State.
They didn't keep you. They didn't have to keep you,
Right.
but they had to take you.
Okay.
So I went to Ohio State. It was a good school. Obviously, I could get in. I didn't have a 4.0. I was average, above average. So I went to Ohio State. And I moved into a fraternity house because I went to a rush party where basically they just, in those years, went to a concert, the Allman Brothers concert, which was one of the big groups of the 70s. And, we smoked dope. They had strippers. I mean, they gave you
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Exactly.
Right.
100%. So when you left
1973, 72, 73.
72, 73. So how can you say no to that?
Right.
You're going to join the fraternity. And of course, my mother and my father, what was good enough for him, it's good enough for you, so
Sure.
you can join the fraternity house.
So you joined the fraternity.
Which I joined the fraternity house, and I was guilty of too
Sex,
much
drugs,
partying,
and rock and roll.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Okay.
I didn't study well.
Okay.
I blew through my grandparents' mother.
Really?
I absolutely blew through it, and I came to a point in my college career that I was basically in the middle of nowhere. My money had pretty well run out, and I couldn't say to my parents, "I'm out of money." I just couldn't do that. So I picked myself up by my bootstraps, and I went out and I got a job. And I started working at a men's clothing store in the mall in Columbus. And I worked for a Jewish guy, and he was really, really good to me. I would work from noon till 9 o'clock at night. If I needed time to study for finals, whatever it is, he gave me the time off. I needed time to write a paper. He was there to help me and do that. So the other thing that happened was that I was moving from major to major, I basically had credits that went nowhere. So I heard about a school called Franklin University, which was in downtown Columbus. And they had a really good business program. They were accredited. And I inquired, and I ended up enrolling there. And that was one of the hardest things I told my parents that I can no longer continue to Ohio State. Don't worry about me. I've got a job. I will take care of what I need to do to get through school. And that was the best life lesson I learned. I learned that you can work 40 hours a week, and you can study, get things done, and do something with your life. And the only thing that made sense for me in those years was accounting, because it seemed as though I would come home at night. It's 9:30 at night, and I've got to study, and I've got workbooks to finish, and balance sheets and income statement, all that kind of stuff. But I would sit at my desk. I bought an old wooden desk, huge old wooden desk, and I would sit there, and in my own mind, I was an accountant, and I put myself in that role, and I excelled. I just did.
You loved it.
Great. I loved it. It made sense to me. I was a 4-point student there.
And you graduated from Franklin?
I graduated from Franklin University. I had some professors that became good friends of mine that helped me through. I had one professor, I was 2 hours short of graduating. And I went to him and I said, his name was Jim Garvick. I said, Jim, I need 2 credit hours. Can you give me something to do, some extracurricular work that you can see to it so I can get 2 more credit hours? And he said, absolutely. He says, come see me next week. And I went to his office and I said, what do you have for me? And he handed me this great big workbook from the AICPA on subchapter S corporations. He says, you know what a subchapter S corporation is? I said, absolutely. He says, okay, I want you to take this workbook, and in 1 month, I want this to be totally filled out, totally done, complete, and then you bring it to me, and I'll test you, and we'll work on it. And I got home, and I looked at it, and it was pretty scary. And I completed it, and I was proud. And I went into his office to give it to him, for he would grade it. And he looked at it, he thumbed through the pages, and he said, what did you learn? I told him what I learned. He folded it back up, gave it to me, and he says, you've got 2 credit hours.
And that's how you got out.
That's how I got out. And it was no gift. It was no gift, because I knew that I had to get out, and I had to get into the workforce.
Right. So along the way, you met my sister.
I did.
Okay. And you weren't letting that go either.
No, I met her in 1973, the first night that the students were moving into the dorms.
Were you a year older?
I was living in a fraternity house.
But you were a freshman too.
I was a freshman too.
So you got there maybe a day or so early?
I was there about 2 weeks early because we could move in.
Right.
And now all the freshmen are coming in, and
the girls are here.
The girls are here, and we knew where the Jewish girls, the dorms were, and I came across your sister. And was it love at first sight? She'll say it was.
You of her.
I may debate it a little bit, but there's one thing about me in life, and that is that if there's something I really want, I'm not going to give up on it until I get it.
Okay.
And yeah, I worked hard, and we'll be married 45 years in November.
So, all right, so now give me you guys have been married 45 years, run through the grandkids, your kids, and grandkids, and if you know all their ages, give me the whole rundown of everybody.
Well, my oldest is my daughter, Abby. Abby will be 42 years old.
Okay.
She has 3 sons. She has, let me say this to you. About 12 years ago, she was living in Los Angeles. Abby went to school at the University of Cincinnati, got a degree in communications, and at the end of the day, she learned the best job she could get after she graduated was working at P.F. Chang's as a hostess. And she called one day and says, I want to go to fashion school. And I said, okay, what is fashion school? And she explained to me what it was. I says, okay, you know what? You show me where you want to go, why you want to go there, give me all the information, and we'll talk about it. And I figured it would just be a passing phase, but it wasn't. And she
went to LA.
She went to LA to FIDM, and she was a fairly good student at University of Cincinnati. She was an exceptional student when she got to fashion school. She was there for almost 3 years, did exceptionally well. She went right from school right into working for the Disney Corporation, the children's line, and she had never looked for work ever. She always was able to secure a job in the fashion world, and it's something that she became passionate with.
And she met her husband.
And she met her husband in LA, who was from Israel, and they were getting a little serious, and he had told her that he was moving to, going back to Israel, because he has a very large family. And a month later, he left and called her up, said, I want you to come meet my family. And my daughter went to Israel, and she called up and said, I'm moving to Israel. No ring, no real commitment, but that's my daughter. And he married my son-in-law. They've got an incredible relationship. He's a great, great man. He's a great father. They have 3 wonderful boys. They have Arad, who's 8 years old, Aviad, who's 7, and Adam, who's 4. And grandchildren, as some of you may know, is you love them probably more than your own children. There's something about it, I don't know what it is, but you just, it's a love affair that's like none other.
Okay.
And
so that's your daughter.
That's my daughter, and then my son Chad, who I am very proud of, as I am my daughter. I mean, my daughter has made her way through Israel. She did something that I believe many women her age would never be able to pull off, and that's to make a life for herself in a foreign country in Israel. Sure. So my son, very proud of him. He is in hospital administration. He started that journey when he was in high school. They had a mentorship program, and at that particular time, our neighbor who lived right across the street from us was the CEO of one of the health systems here in Toledo, knocked on his door, said, Mr. Mickes, can I shadow you? And Mr. Mickes said, absolutely. Chad spent literally, which was supposed to be 6 weeks, turned into be about 3 to 4 months. This man put him from the different hospitals, different positions, and when he was all done, he says, this is what I want to do for a living. And he worked tirelessly. No one opened any doors for him. He did every break, every summer, every spring, no matter what it was. He found an internship, and he was constantly working in the field of hospital administration, to the point that he went on to grad school. He went to Cornell and got his master's in hospital administration, did incredibly well. He acquired a job before he graduated, and his career has been in high gear ever since.
And he
is 37 years old.
Married?
He's married. He has one son, Zev, who is 2.5. He'll be 3 in October, and he is an incredible young man. He's got a wonderful wife, and they live in Walnut Creek, California. They're very happy. So, I guess the best thing I can say is this, that I'm in a situation that many parents are in, maybe some that are not, but my children are off and running in the world. I don't have to worry about them. I know that they'll be safe and be sound, and they're successful with their work life and with their family life. And there's no greater reward than that in my life.
Okay. So, from everything that, you talk about your growth personally and others around you. So if you were to give a message to Zev, who's 2.5, and your 3 grandsons about who you are and who you would want them to be, give it.
Well, I guess it's going to be along the same things that my parents instilled upon me, and that's to be your own man. I don't want to say the old Uncle George theory, work hard 7 days a week and at the corner grocery store, and where are you at in 20 years? You're still at the corner grocery store working 7 days a week. But I think it's really important that you learn early on what your passion is, where you want to head in life, what your vocation may be. And it can, no matter what it is, it doesn't have to be a professional. You don't have to be a doctor or an attorney. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, something that you love doing, that you want to go to work every day and be proud of what you do, you need to discover that as early as you can. Because sometimes what I've seen, and especially I learned for myself, is that if you know what you want to do when you're going to embark in college, it makes things so much easier. You have a direction, you can put a roadmap together, and you'll know where you want to head. And that is the best advice I can give you, is to have a plan, and you can execute the plan.
Let's end there. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. What'd you think?
It's tough. Very tough.
Very great, Brian.
It's very emotional.
That was great. I learned a lot about you, Brian.
You did?
Oh my gosh. Of course. I hope this thing fucking recorded.
That was good, Brian.
You listened?